There's a number almost every Australian secretly carries around in their head. A number they believe would finally fix everything. Maybe it's $100,000. Maybe it's $1 million. Maybe it's just enough money to stop checking their banking app every second day. Because right now, for millions of Australians, money quietly controls their lives. It controls their sleep, their stress, their relationships. Whether a strange sound from the car creates instant panic. Whether they answer unknown phone calls. And underneath all of that is one simple question. How much money do you actually need to stop worrying in Australia? Today, we're going to answer that honestly. Not fantasy numbers, not billionaire lifestyles. Real numbers, for real Australians, living in the economy we actually have right now. And the answer is strange, because for most people, the number is simultaneously lower and much higher than they expected. Let's start with something important. Financial stress usually has very little to do with luxury. It has to do with instability. The fear that one unexpected problem could throw your entire life sideways. That's what people really mean when they say they want enough money. They want breathing room. Because when you have no buffer, every problem becomes an emergency. A rent increase, a dental bill, a broken fridge, an interest rate rise. Suddenly your entire month collapses. So the first level of never worrying again is not wealth, it's stability. And in Australia right now, that stability usually starts with 3 to 6 months of living expenses saved. For most Australians, that's roughly $15,000 to $30,000 in accessible cash. Not invested aggressively, not locked away, available. And here's why this matters so much. Once you have that buffer, something changes psychologically. You stop feeling hunted by life. You stop feeling like one unexpected expense could destroy everything. And honestly, for many Australians, this level alone would completely transform their stress levels. But stability is not freedom. Stability means you can survive problems. Freedom means your life no longer revolves around money decisions every single day. And this is where the numbers climb quickly. Let's talk about income first. Right now, the average full-time salary in Australia sits a little above $100,000. Sounds high. But after tax, housing costs, and inflation, a six-figure salary no longer feels rich in major Australian cities, especially Sydney and Melbourne. For a single person today, a genuinely comfortable life often requires around $90,000 to $120,000 gross income. Enough to pay housing costs, save consistently, travel occasionally, eat out without guilt, and absorb normal life expenses without constant anxiety. For families, the number rises dramatically. A combined household income between $180,000 and $250,000 is often where many Australian families finally feel breathing room. Not luxury, just space. Space to save. Space to invest. Space to stop panicking over every bill. And this is where people get shocked. Because earning enough money to stop stressing is very different from owning enough assets to stop working. Those are two completely different levels. So now let's talk about the second one, financial independence. The point where your investments can support your lifestyle without employment income. This is the level many people are actually imagining when they say, "I just want enough money to never worry again." And in Australia, the math is surprisingly straightforward. Most financial planners use something close to the 4% rule, meaning if you withdraw around 4% of your portfolio annually, your money should theoretically last for decades. So let's use real numbers. If your annual living costs are $60,000, you'd need roughly $1.5 million invested. If your lifestyle costs $80,000 per year, you're closer to $2 million. Want $120,000 annually? Now you're approaching $3 million. And suddenly, people realize something important. The real number is not random. It depends entirely on the life you're trying to maintain. Because someone living simply in regional Queensland might feel financially free with $1.2 million, while someone in Sydney with private school fees, luxury travel, and expensive habits might still feel financially stressed with twice that amount. This is why money alone does not automatically remove worry. Lifestyle matters just as much. In fact, one of the strangest things about wealth is that expenses often rise with income. Someone earning $350,000 a year can still feel trapped because they built a lifestyle requiring $350,000 to maintain. The larger mortgage, the luxury cars, the constant upgrades. Their fixed costs grew faster than their assets, which means psychologically, they still feel pressure. And this is the hidden truth most people never realize. Financial peace does not come purely from earning more. It comes from meeting less, relative to what you own. That gap changes everything. Because someone with modest expenses and strong investments often feels far calmer than someone with enormous income and enormous obligations. Now let's talk about the emotional side of this. Because money stress does not magically disappear the moment your bank balance rises, people imagine there's some magical number where anxiety vanishes forever. But human psychology doesn't work like that. When people earn more, their fears usually evolve. First, it's survival, then maintenance, then preservation, then legacy. Someone with $5,000 worries about rent. Someone with $500,000 worries about retirement. Someone with $5 million worries about protecting wealth for their children. The worries simply change shape, which means never worrying again is partly financial, but also deeply psychological. And this is where many Australians quietly lose perspective. Globally, Australia is already one of the wealthiest countries on Earth. If you own a home, have superannuation, and stable income, you are already financially ahead of most humans who have ever lived. But comparison destroys that feeling constantly. Because Australians rarely compare themselves globally. They compare themselves locally, to the neighbor with the renovated kitchen, the friend with the investment property, the coworker driving the luxury SUV. And comparison creates permanent dissatisfaction, even at high income levels. This is why many wealthy people still do not feel financially secure. Because security is partly about numbers, but also about expectations. And expectations can expand forever. Now here's the practical reality. For most Australians, the point where financial stress drops dramatically usually comes from three things happening together. First, an emergency buffer. Second, manageable housing costs. Third, consistent investments quietly growing in the background. That combination changes your entire relationship with money. Because now your life stops depending solely on your next paycheck. Your money starts supporting you back. And once that happens, something incredible changes psychologically. You stop making desperate decisions. You negotiate differently, invest differently, work differently, because fear stops controlling every choice. And honestly, that might be the real definition of wealth. Not private jets, not luxury watches, not giant mansions, just the ability to live without constant financial fear, to wake up calmly, to handle problems without panic, and to know your future is becoming more secure instead of less. For some Australians, that number might be $50,000 saved. For others, it might be $2 million invested. But the principle underneath it is always the same. Wealth is not about impressing people. It's about reducing pressure. And the people who eventually stop worrying about money usually are not the biggest spenders. They are the people who consistently built margin between what they earned and what they needed. Because eventually, that margin compounds into freedom. And most people spend their entire lives chasing numbers without ever stopping to define what enough actually means. If this changed how you think about money and security, subscribe. Because the moment you define enough clearly, money starts affecting your life very differently.